From Passion to Peace by James Allen. Foreword. The first three parts of this book, Passion, Aspiration, and Temptation, represent the common human life, with its passion, pathos, and tragedy. The last three parts, Transcendence, Beatitude, and Peace, represent the divine life, calm, wise, and beautiful, of the Sage and Savior. The middle part, Transmutation, is the transitional stage between the two. It is the alchemic process linking the divine with the human life. Discipline, denial, and renunciation do not constitute the divine state. They are only the means by which it is attained. The divine life is established in that perfect knowledge which bestows perfect peace. James Allen. Amid the din and strife of men, the call divine I hear again. Its telling is of things apart, above the tumult of the heart. High over where sin's dark pathways wind, waits the wise willing of the mind. Beyond strong passion's guarded gates, their peace awaits, their peace awaits. End of foreword. Chapter 1. Passion. The pathway of the saints and sages, the road of the wise and the pure, the highway along which the Saviors have trod, and which all Saviors to come will walk. Such is the subject of this book, such is the high and holy theme which the author briefly expounds in these pages. Passion is the lowest level of human life. None can descend lower. In its chilling swamps and concealing darkness creep and crawl the creatures of the sunless world. Lust, hatred, anger, covetousness, pride, vanity, greed, revenge, envy, backbiting, lying, theft, deceit, treachery, cruelty, suspicion, jealousy. Such are the brute forces and blind, unreasoning impulses that inhabit the underworld of passion, and roam devouring and devoured in the rank primeval jungles of the human mind. There also dwell the dark shapes of remorse, pain, and suffering, and the drooping forms of grief, sorrow, and lamentation. In this dark world the unwise live and die, not knowing the peace of purity, nor the joy of that divine light which forever shines above them and for them. Yet it shines in vain so long as it falls on the unseeing eyes which look not up, but are ever bent earthward, fleshward. But the wise look up. They are not satisfied with this passion world. They bend their steps towards the upper world of peace, the light and the glory of which they behold, at first far off, but nearer and with ever-increasing splendor as they ascend. None can fall lower than passion, but all can rise higher. In that lowest place where further descent is impossible, all who move forward must ascend. The ascending pathway is always at hand, near and easily accessible. It is the way of self-conquest. He has already entered into it who has begun to say nay to his selfishness, who has begun to discipline his desires, and to control and command the unruly elements of his mind. Passion is the arch-enemy of mankind, the slayer of happiness, the opposite and enemy of peace. From it proceeds all that defiles and destroys. It is the source of misery and the promulgator of mischief and disaster. The inner world of selfishness is rooted in ignorance of divine law, of divine goodness, ignorance of the pure way and the peaceful path. Passion is dark, and it thrives and flourishes in spiritual darkness. It cannot enter the regions of spiritual light. In the enlightened mind the darkness of ignorance is destroyed. In the pure heart there is no place for passion. Passion in all its forms is a mental thirst, a fever, a torturing unrest. As a fire consumes a magnificent building, reducing it to a heap of unsightly ashes, so are men consumed by the flames of passions, and their deeds and works fall and perish. If one would find peace, he must come out of passion. The wise man subdues his passions. The foolish man is subdued by them. The seeker for wisdom begins by turning his back on folly. The lover of peace enters the way which leads thereto, and with every step he takes, he leaves further below and behind him the dark dwelling place of passion and despair. The first step towards the heights of wisdom and peace is to understand the darkness and misery of selfishness, and when that is understood, the overcoming of it, the coming out of it, will follow. Selfishness, or passion, not only subsists in the gross forms of greed and glaringly ungoverned conditions of the mind, it informs also every hidden thought which is subtly connected with the assumption and glorification of one's self. It is most deceiving and subtle when it prompts one to dwell upon the selfishness in others, to accuse them of it, and to talk about it. The man who continually dwells upon the selfishness in others will not thus overcome his own selfishness. Not by accusing others do we come out of selfishness, but by purifying ourselves. The way from passion to peace is not by hurling painful charges against others, but by overcoming one's self. By eagerly striving to subdue the selfishness of others, we remain passion-bound. By patiently overcoming our own selfishness, we ascend to freedom. Only he who has conquered himself can subdue others, and he subdues them not by passion, but by love. The foolish man accuses others and justifies himself, but he who is becoming wise justifies others and accuses himself. The way from passion to peace is not in the outer world of people. It is in the inner world of thoughts. It does not consist in altering the deeds of others. It consists in perfecting one's own deeds. Frequently, the man of passion is most eager to put others right, but the man of wisdom puts himself right. If one is anxious to reform the world, let him begin by reforming himself. The reformation of self does not end with the elimination of the sensual elements only. That is its beginning. It ends only when every vain thought and selfish aim is overcome. Short of perfect purity and wisdom, there is still some form of self-slavery or folly which needs to be conquered. Passion is at the base of the structure of life. Peace is at its crown and summit. Without passion to begin with, there would be no power to work with, and no achievement to end with. Passion represents power, but power misdirected, power producing hurt instead of happiness. Its forces, while instruments of destruction in the hands of the foolish, are instruments of preservation in the hands of the wise. When curbed and concentrated and beneficially directed, they represent working energy. Passion is the flaming sword which guards the gates of paradise. It shuts out and destroys the foolish. It admits and preserves the wise. He is the foolish man who does not know the extent of his own ignorance, who is the slave of thoughts of self, who obeys the impulses of passion. He is the wise man who knows his own ignorance, who understands the emptiness of selfish thoughts, who masters the impulses of passion. The fool descends into deeper and deeper ignorance. The wise man ascends into higher and higher knowledge. The fool desires, suffers, and dies. The wise man aspires, rejoices, and lives. With mind intent on wisdom and mental gaze raised upward, the spiritual warrior perceives the upward way and fixes his attention upon the heights of peace. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2. Aspiration. With the clear perception of one's own ignorance comes the desire for enlightenment, and thus in the heart is born aspiration, the rapture of the saints. On the wings of aspiration man rises from earth to heaven, from ignorance to knowledge, from the underdarkness to the upper light. Without it he remains a groveling animal, earthly, sensual, unenlightened and uninspired. Aspiration is the longing for heavenly things, for righteousness, compassion, purity, love, as distinguished from desire, which is the longing for earthly things, for selfish possessions, personal dominance, low pleasures, and sensual gratifications. As a bird deprived of its wings cannot soar, so a man without aspiration cannot rise above his surroundings and become a master of his animal inclinations. He is the slave of passions, is subject to others, and is carried hither and thither by the changing current of events. For one to begin to aspire means that he is dissatisfied with his low status and is aiming at a higher condition. It is a sure sign that he is aroused out of his lethargic sleep of animality and has become conscious of nobler attainments and a fuller life. Aspiration makes all things possible. It opens the way to advancement. Even the highest state of perfection conceivable it brings near and makes real and possible, for that which can be conceived can be achieved. Aspiration is the twin angel to inspiration. It unlocks the gates of joy. Singing accompanies soaring. Music, poetry, prophecy, and all high and holy instruments are at last placed in the hands of those whose aspirations flag not, whose spirit does not fail. So long as animal conditions taste sweet to a man, he cannot aspire, he is already satisfied. But when their sweetness turns to bitterness, then in his sorrow he thinks of nobler things. When he is deprived of earthly joy, he aspires to the joy which is heavenly. It is when impurity turns to suffering that purity is sought. Truly aspiration rises, phoenix-like, from the dead ashes of repentance, but on its powerful pinions man can reach the heaven of heavens. The man of aspiration has entered the way which ends in peace, and surely he will reach that end if he neither stays nor turns back. If he constantly renews his mind with glimpses of the heavenly vision, he will reach the heavenly state. Man attains to the measure that he aspires. His longing is to be the gauge of what he can be. To fix the mind is to foreordain the achievement. As a man can experience and know all low things, so he can experience and know all high things. As he has become human, so he can become divine. The turning of the mind in high and divine directions is the sole and needful task. What is impurity but the impure thoughts of the thinker? What is purity but the pure thoughts of the thinker? One man does not do the thinking of another. Each man is pure or impure of himself alone. If a man thinks, It is through others or circumstances or heredity that I am impure. How can he hope to overcome his errors? Such a thought will check all holy aspirations, and will bind him to the slavery of passion. When a man fully perceives that his errors and impurities are his own, that they are generated and fostered by himself, that he alone is responsible for them, then he will aspire to overcome them. The way of attainment will be opened up to him, and he will see from where and to what destination he is traveling. The man of passion sees no straight path before him, and behind him all is fog and gloom. He seizes the pleasure of the moment, and does not strive for understanding or think of wisdom. His way is confused, turbulent, and troubled, and his heart is far from peace. The man of aspiration sees before him the pathway up the heavenly heights, and behind him are the circuitous routes of passion up which he has hitherto blindly groped. Striving for understanding, and his mind set on wisdom, his way is clear, and his heart already experiences a foretaste of the final peace. Men of passion strive mightily to achieve little things, things which speedily perish, and in the place where they were leave nothing to be remembered. Men of aspiration strive with equal might to achieve great things, things of virtue, of knowledge, of wisdom, which do not perish, but stand as monuments of inspiration for the uplifting of humankind. As the merchant perceives worldly success by persistent exertion, so the saint achieves spiritual success by aspiration and endeavor. One becomes a merchant, the other a saint, by the particular direction in which his mental energy is guided. When the rapture of aspiration touches the mind, it at once refines it, and the dross of its impurities begin to fall away. While aspiration holds the mind, no impurity can enter it, for the impure and the pure cannot at the same moment occupy the thought. But the effort of aspiration is at first spasmodic and short-lived. The mind falls back into its habitual error, and must be constantly renewed. The lover of the pure life renews his mind daily with the invigorating glow of aspiration. He rises early, and fortifies his mind with strong thoughts and strenuous endeavor. He knows that the mind is of such a nature that it cannot remain for a moment unoccupied, and that, if it is not held and guided by high thoughts and pure aspirations, it will assuredly be enslaved and misguided by low thoughts and base desires. Aspiration can be fed, fostered, and strengthened by daily habit, just as desire. It can be sought and admitted into the mind as a divine guide, or it can be neglected and shut out. To retire for a short time each day to some quiet spot, preferably in the open air, and there call up the energies of the mind in surging waves of holy rapture, is to prepare the mind for great spiritual victories and destinies of divine import. For such a rapture is the preparation for wisdom and the prelude to peace. Before the mind can contemplate pure things, it must be lifted up to them. It must rise above impure things, and aspiration is the instrument by which this is accomplished. By its aid the mind soars swiftly and surely into heavenly places, and begins to experience divine things. It begins to accumulate wisdom, and to learn to guide itself by an ever-increasing measure of the divine light of pure knowledge. To thirst for righteousness, to hunger for the pure life, to rise in holy rapture on the wings of angelic aspiration, this is the right road to wisdom. This is the right striving for peace. This is the right beginning of the way divine. End of Chapter 2. Chapter 3. Temptation. Aspiration can carry a man into heaven, but to remain there, he must learn to conform his entire mind to the heavenly conditions. To this end, temptation works. Temptation is the reversion, in thought, from purity to passion. It is going back from aspiration to desire. It threatens aspiration until the point is reached where desire is quenched in the waters of pure knowledge and calm thought. In the early stages of aspiration, temptation is subtle and powerful, and is regarded as an enemy. But it is only an enemy in the sense that the one tempted is his own enemy. In the sense that it is the revealer of weakness and impurity, it is a friend, a necessary factor in spiritual training. It is, indeed, an accompaniment of the effort to overcome evil and apprehend good. To be successfully conquered, the evil in a man must come to the surface and present itself, and it is in temptation that the evil hidden in the heart stands revealed and exposed. That which temptation appeals to and arouses is unconquered desire, and temptation will again and again assail a man until he has lifted himself above the lusting impulses. Temptation is an appeal to the impure. That which is pure cannot be subject to temptation. Temptation waylays the man of aspiration until he touches the reign of the divine consciousness, and beyond that border temptation cannot follow him. It is when a man begins to aspire that he begins to be tempted. Aspiration rouses up all the latent good and evil, in order that the man may be fully revealed to himself. For a man cannot overcome himself unless he fully knows himself. It can scarcely be said of the merely animal man that he is tempted, for the very presence of temptation means that there is a striving for a purer state. Animal desire and gratification is the normal condition of the man who has not yet risen into aspiration. He wishes for nothing more, nothing better, than his sensual enjoyments, and this, for the present, satisfied. Such a man cannot be tempted to fall, for he has not yet risen. The presence of aspiration signifies that a man has taken one step, at least, upward, and is therefore capable of being drawn back. This backward attraction is called temptation. The allurements of temptation subsist in the impure thoughts and downward desires of the heart. The object of temptation is powerless to attract when the heart no longer lusts for it. The stronghold of temptation is within a man, not without, and until a man realizes this, the period of temptation will be prolonged. While a man continues to run away from outward objects until the delusion that temptation subsists entirely in them, and does not attack and purge away his impure imaginings, his temptations will increase, and his falls will be many and grievous. When a man clearly perceives that the evil is within and not without, then his progress will be rapid, his temptations will decrease, and the final overcoming of all temptation will be well within the range of his spiritual vision. Temptation is torment. It is not an abiding condition, but is a passage from the lower condition to the higher. The fullness and perfection of life is bliss, not torment. Temptation accompanies weakness and defeat, but a man is destined for strength and victory. The presence of torment is the signal to rise and conquer. The man of persistence and ever-renewed aspiration does not allow himself to think that temptation cannot be overcome. He is determined to be the master of himself. Resignation to evil is an acknowledgment of defeat. It signifies that the battle against self is abandoned, that good is denied, that evil is made supreme. As the energetic man of business is not daunted by difficulties but studies how to overcome them, so the man of ceaseless aspiration is not crushed into submission by temptations, but meditates how he may fortify his mind. For the tempter is like a coward, he only creeps in at weak and unguarded points. The tempted one should study thoughtfully the nature and meaning of temptation, for until it is known it cannot be overcome. A wise general, before attacking the opposing force, studies the tactics of his enemy. Likewise, he who is to overcome temptation must understand how it arises in his own darkness and error, and must study, by introspection and meditation, how to disperse the darkness and supplement the error by truth. The stronger a man's passions, the fiercer will be his temptations. The deeper his selfishness, the more subtle his temptations. The more pronounced his vanity, the more flattering and deceptive his temptations. A man must know himself if he is to know the truth. He must not shrink away from any revelation which will expose his error. On the contrary, he must welcome such revelations, as it aids to that self-knowledge which is the handmaid of self-conquest. The man who cannot endure to have his errors and shortcomings brought to the surface and made known, but tries to hide them, is unfit to walk the highway of truth. He is not properly equipped to battle with and overcome temptation. He who cannot fearlessly face his lower nature cannot climb the rugged heights of renunciation. Let the tempted one know this, that he himself is both tempter and tempted, that all his enemies are within, that the flatterers which seduce, the taunts which stab, and the flames which burn, all spring from that inner region of ignorance and error in which he has hitherto lived. Knowing this, let him be assured of complete victory over evil. When he is sorely tempted, let him not mourn therefore, but let him rejoice in that his strength is tried and his weaknesses exposed. For he who truly knows and humbly acknowledges his weaknesses will not be slow in setting about the acquisition of strength. Foolish men blame others for their lapses and sins, but let the truth-lover blame only himself. Let him acknowledge his complete responsibility for his own conduct, and not say when he falls, "This thing, or such and such a circumstance, or that man was to blame." For the most which others can do is to afford an opportunity for our own good or evil to manifest itself. They cannot make us good or evil. Temptation is at first sore, grievous, and hard to be borne, and subtle and persistent is the assailant. But if the tempted one is firm and courageous, and does not give way, he will gradually subdue his spiritual enemy, and will finally triumph in the knowledge of good. The adverse one is compounded of a man's own lust, selfishness, and pride. When these are put away, evil is seen to be naught, and good is revealed in all victorious splendor. End of chapter 3.